And welcome back to the vlog. Doing some meat processing today, so I figured I'd go through a handful of tips. Behind me here, I've got an audience. I think these cows are stoked that processing an elk, and not one of them. Alright, so myself and really my whole family have been processing all of our own game animals for the last probably 5 years, and we just love to have full control over the process. There's definitely some great meat processors out there, but we've just had some bad luck over the years, you know, getting back only half of the animal that you brought in, or getting back someone else's meat, or the meat is super dirty and unclean, etc. So again, we just love to have full control of the process. Alright, so first tip with wild game processing. This is an in the field tip, and one thing I always throw in my pack, in addition to my game bags, knives, etc., is an 8x10 tarp. I've got a Dyneema tarp from Z-Packs. The thing weighs, I don't know, 5 ounces. When I get an elk down, I will lay that tarp out right next to the elk. And when I start to debone or pull meat off, I will then take that meat off and I'll lay it directly onto the tarp. And this just allows me to keep the meat perfectly clean, doesn't get any dirt on it. Just gives me a really clean, surface or area to lay the meat down on. And so much of meat processing is just keeping it as clean as possible. So tip number 2, pull the hide off as soon as you possibly can. I rarely leave the hide on. I always pull the hide off in the field, try to get it off within 45 minutes. The hide just has a tendency to, well, it keeps heat in, and it also kind of has a tendency to kind of add flavor, add a gamey flavor to the meat.
So every year we're processing multiple animals, and we want to be sure that we're eating the oldest animals first. So this year we're using the gold marker. Last year we used the black, the prior year for the red. So when it works its way to the bottom of the freezer, at a glance you'll know exactly what year the meat is from. If you double wrap the meat, first in the plastic and then in the paper, meat will last several years. We've eaten meat 3, even 4 years old. And then also don't wrap them too tight, because when they expand, you need to give them a little room. One year we wrapped them way too tight, and then the blood kind of seeped out and popped the seals. So just don't overwrap.
If you have dogs, hauling out an elk bone for that dog is a great thing to do. Great way to utilize a lot more of the animal. A lot of extra weight sometimes when you're packing a long ways, but the dogs certainly appreciate it. At least ours always did. Another way to utilize a lot of scraps, things that maybe they're a little more dried out or a little more full of fiber than you'd want to eat yourself, is to cut and save that stuff off for your pets. We used to make dog food, and we'd put not just the meat in it, but we'd put vegetables and some grains in it as well and cook it up, and our dogs loved it. Felt like it gave them a lot more energy, but again, kind of is a way to utilize more of the animal. This is day 2 of our meat processing function here. Day 1 with our overall butcher process, we take all the scrap meat that we don't make into roasts and steaks and whatnot, cut it into relatively small chunks that'll fit through our grinder tray here in the hole in there, and freeze them in bags and fairly flat. Don't overload these. And why we freeze them is that grinding partially frozen meat just is a lot easier than grinding fully thawed meat, especially on the second pass through the grinder. We do 2 passes. One, we get a coarse grind, is what you see here, and then we get a much finer grind in our second pass with a different plate on the grinder.
And my final tip is to, anytime you can, let the meat hang. If it's nice and cool outside, let the meat hang instead of leaving it in a cooler. If you leave it in a cooler, it's just gonna kind of sit and soak in its own blood. And it's not gonna make the meat go bad, it just might not taste as good. And it's just good to let the meat drain. So Karen, my fiance now, just shot this antelope a couple hours ago. So we, as soon as we got back to the truck, we threw it in the cooler, and then as soon as we got back home, we pulled it out of the cooler and got it hanging in this aspen tree. So yeah, final tip, let it hang. But that's a wrap on this vlog. Hope you liked it, hope you learned something. If you did, let me know in the comments and hit the like button, all of which would help me out a ton. So thanks for following along. We'll see you next time.